Well, Andrew, thanks for joining us today at Security Edge. And today's theme is risk, visibility and protection in a distributed world. What does that theme mean to you?
Well, I think we are in a risky world and I think we all need visibility. You can't fix things if you can't see them. So, and as you mentioned, it's a connected world. We have so many third parties, like there's not one little thing that you run inside your organisation that hasn't started somewhere else in its lifetime and then it comes up to be finally used by you. So you've got that whole supply chain to not just be concerned about, but to make sure that it's working well.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about some of the ADAPT research published recently, 78% of security leaders say that managing third-party risk is one of their most concerning threats behind things like ransomware and data security and things like that. When you're thinking about the architecture of your organisation and how you're securing those frameworks, what are some of the principles that you're pursuing?
Yeah, well, supply chain in itself, and now that I'm in a utility and national critical infrastructure, there's only a few people that supply the really big things that you need. So your supply chain is limited. So if something affects one or the other, you don't have a lot of areas to go to. So it sort of ups the ante in regards to what you're doing. So to work out what we do, we need to architect it, right? I'm a firm believer in architecture as being the basis of making good decisions so that you're not just making wayward ones. And what do we do? Well, as a utility in energy, our big thing is safety. So when architecting, we need to be safe, but putting that with security, so it's safe and secure by design, is how we architect.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when we think about architecting things in a safe and a secure way, we're also needing to make sure that we can keep operations running in a way that's efficient and also easy for our users and our downstream customers as well. When balancing those constraints and thinking about how you bake in security from the start, what have been some of the challenges and how are you approaching those?
I think one of the challenges is that when you're building a utility, the time frame is very different to what it is in technology. So they're building buildings or towers or telecommunications, and these assets are 30 to 50 years horizon. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about security, if you had something that lasted for 30 years, you'd be very impressed, but you generally won't be very good at what it's supposed to be doing. So it's trying to align that 3 to 5 year cycle of technology and security versus the time frame of building all of this infrastructure and energy that production and transmission that we need to do. So I haven't cracked it yet, I'll let you know that now, but it's certainly what I've done is I've aligned the architecture team to start putting that safety component in with the security component. Mm-hmm. We can probably design for safety a lot longer period than we can with security. So do it based on the function of what we're doing. Like you're always going to need some point of endpoint detection and response, but which company does that and who does it best can change over time.
Mm-hmm. So when we think about ongoing resilience, part of it is sourcing the right solutions, getting the right skills, but also thinking about how your strategy needs to change over these long time horizons. And you kind of alluded to it there before about sort of building an effective and a high performing team. So, senior security talent is fairly scarce in the market at the moment. And we've got a lot of skills across the organisation, maybe not necessarily in the security team right now, but what are some of the things we can do to bring in solutions, innovation, ideas from the rest of the organisation, but also the skills and the resourcing as well?
Yeah, well, it's tough, right? And depending on what kind of industry you're in, there's a smaller and smaller circle of people who understand it and know what to do with it. But like a lot of things, there are a lot of people that have a passion for something that isn't necessarily their job. So we've seen that with the engineering teams. These are electrical engineers. They love playing with things. They love doing things, and they've got a security bent. So it's about harnessing that and, asking them the right questions and saying, how would you get in? And then all of a sudden you're moving across from what they were doing to moving across into our world, and you're sort of bridging that gap.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely, I think, more than 2 in every 5 organisations here in Australia right now, when they think about how they raise awareness for security across the organisation, they're perhaps running general training programs with the whole organisation maybe twice, once, or maybe even never every year. What are some of the ways that you can improve engagement and understanding for security rather necessarily than taking a test and comply type of approach?
It's got to be relevant to their role, and it's got to make a difference to their day-to-day. So one of the things we try to do is we take a person and we say, what can I teach them here at work that's going to work for them at home? What can they go and teach their kids about something? Mm-hmm. Everyone uses passwords. The way that we do passwords is archaic. So we're teaching everyone at the moment how to turn multifactor authentication on, not just for work, but for all of the things that they have at home, because it's just such a step up from where just a username and password. The other thing we teach them is how to change their password. So, if anyone ever does a test, you find out that most people just increment their password by 1 number. Mm-hmm. And it could be a good password, or it was, but it's not. Once it's up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we try and teach them, there's instructions from the ACSC, so the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. There's the instructions from the US CSER and also the UK ones. And it's about changing it to say, well, instead of using that, why don't you try using 3 words, 3 random words. Mm-hmm. It's easier to remember, than percentage signs and ats and all of those things and where things can be, but it's actually more secure in the long run.
Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is having our users think about security not as an afterthought, but really doing the secure things as muscle memory, mm-hmm. almost. So when I look at some of the statistics in terms of the metrics that security leaders have, I kind of bucket them into 3 areas. So you've got those traditional response kind of metrics, how fast can we respond to an incident, how much downtime, how much cost there is associated with it. But also we need to kind of take a step back. How good are we identifying these issues? But also what are we doing in terms of preparing? So thinking about mapping the organisation's architecture, people, process against the threats, how they're evolving. How are you approaching preparing the organisation to respond to these issues?
Well, we're fortunate in Australia that we've been legislated to also respond to these issues. So that helps when you're talking about educating the organisation. When you've got a regulatory obligation that sits behind the fact that you need to do this, it's a little bit stronger than saying, well, this is how you be secure. We identify, we protect, we detect, we respond and we recover. That's our mapping, which is based off NIST. In regards to how we do it, the identification bit is something that you need to train people to do. Mm-hmm. It's not a natural thing. Someone gets a phishing email and it says there's 12 dancing monkeys, and they want to see the 12 dancing monkeys, they're going to click on the link. Mm-hmm.
So it's humans are humans at the end of the day,
right.
And you have to sort of align to their proclivities, their understanding, but also trying to show where the value is as well. And I guess if you were going to leave one last thought with the community, what would it be?
Well, for this community and the ADAPT and silos, we have really good advice and education and instruction that the government provides at cyber.gov.au. It has the ASD Essential Aid or the Information Security Manual, but it still comes down to there's 3 things that people should be doing. One of them is multi-factor authentication, another one's backup, and the other one is just think before you click. Mm-hmm.